I would like to talk about someone who was very dear to me, and some of you know who he is. Some of you have laughed at his comedy. Some of you have gone to his shows and have fallen out of your seats or your chairs or what have you because of the comedy that he gave you, and that person is my cousin David Chappelle. David Chappelle and I were first cousins. Okay, David and I, we were very, very close. There were times when David and I would talk. I had his cell phone number and he had mine, and we would talk for hours on end. There was nothing that David would not or could not tell me, and vice versa with me to him. We just felt comfortable around each other. David was my yin and I was his yang, or vice versa, as you want to put it, but we were very close. Okay, David was married to his wife Elaine, as some of you all may know. She was a Filipino. She is a Filipino, and his mother's name was we called her Auntie Vaughn, and he has a brother. His brother is named after David's father, William. He's a junior, and then David has a sister whose name is Felicia, and she is a full practicing Muslim. Well, David was he was a Muslim as well, and him and his wife Elaine has two sons along with a daughter, and their names, I'm not going to give you out their names, but they have names of Muslims. That's the initial concept of what I've said about the relationship that David and I have had together. So he loved his wife, he loved his mother, and most of all, David loved his family, and he loved the farm. And some of you may know, he has a farm in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and he has a special name for that farm, which I'm not going to discuss about, but he calls that farm a certain name. Now, and on that farm is acres and acres of land. And I'm telling you, David was a responsible person when it came to his wife, his children, his mother, his family, and particular their farm. Okay, as some of you may know, David had the Chappelle comedy show. And David was doing good on that show. I mean, he was doing great. And David loved that show. David has always loved to make people laugh, and laugh sometimes until your stomach hurts or tears come out your eyes. He was very, very funny, and David has always been a funny type person ever since the time he was a young boy. Even when he would come to family reunions, he would always, he would be in the spotlight making the family laugh, just laugh. And this is something that he always wanted to be, a comedian, to make people laugh. Well, come the time when David, he was the executive producer of the Chappelle comedy show, and as I stated before, he was doing fine, he was doing great. But David knew he had to be responsible for his wife, his children, his mother, and the farm, and for the rest of the members of the Chappelle family. And so he had to take things very serious and take the responsibility very heavy. So he did the Chappelle comedy show, and one day he was called into the executive office, and so David went in, and when he went there, he saw all of these executives and others that were around this table, and they had David surrounded like a clock. And it made David a little nervous because he thought he was talking to a few executives, but not a whole slew of them and other people as well. So they asked David, they told him he was doing fine on the show. Great, the show was great, David, but except for one exceptional thing. And David asked, what? They wanted David to ease up off, making the black characters look as stupid as he was portraying them. They wanted him to ease up off the black race. They wanted him to make the black race more intellectual, more, you get what I'm saying. They wanted him to, to quit it. To quit, just harping on the black race and making them look nonsense. Well, David said, to the executives and then some who were in the room, I don't understand what you're talking about. He said, because I do, or I portray the characters of the black race just like I portray the characters of the white race. And I can't do that. I can't do that. I have to keep both of them on the same level. Well, they didn't mind David downgrading on the white race, but they wanted him to quit downgrading, period, on the black race. And David said, no, well, I can't do that. And so then they said, okay, David, we're going to make a deal with you. And David said, a deal? They said, yes, a deal. They told David, we'll give you $50 million. $50 million if you could come and join our team and be a part of us and this and that. And they told him some other things, which I'm not going to discuss. But you can rest assured the things that they said to David, to tell him what he could do and what he couldn't do and this and that, and then the torture that they had and the pressure that they put pressure on this man, on David at that time of the meeting. Okay, and David said, no, well, if I accept $50 million from you, what would my fans think? And they said to David this, well, your fans already think that you are a crack addict from the characters that you portray. David, they already think that, that you're a pothead, that you're a drug head. So, it doesn't matter what your fans think, it's what you are willing to accept. And then they went on to put the pressure on him once more. And David, he said, no. I can't accept it. I can't accept the $50 million, and I cannot stop portraying the black race as the same as the white race. He said, no, I can't do it. I can't. You all want me to stop making the black race look foolish, but just continue. No, I can't do it. I have to treat the characters that I portray. It has to be on an equal level. You have to understand, David wasn't trying to make the black race look foolish. He was doing comedy, just like Richard Pryor, just like Bernie Mac, just like any other top comedian of long ago and today, Red Fox. Because see, David knew he was a black man, and David knew where his roots came from. He knew where his roots came from. The reason why they wanted David to quit having blacks to be foolish in the roles or the characters that he was playing was because at that time they knew, they had gotten word of, that eventually there was going to be a black man to be ushered in as our new president. And they wanted people all over to think that, that black people were not this way, and black people were not that way, because they were ushering in Obama. That's why they wanted, and David, he wasn't for that. Okay. So David told these executives, David told these executives, he said, well, let me think about this thing for a while. He said, because I can't give you an answer right now. He said, because all that you have said to me, is something where I got to think about. He said, I just can't give you an answer right now. And so with that, when David left out of that office, David called me. When David called me and told me everything that they said to him in the executive office. David told me everything from A to Z. And what David told me, it caused me to get a headache. If I had been in that room, and it would have scared the hell out of me, because it in fact scared the hell out of David Chappelle. And David told me, upon talking to me, he said, cuz I got to go. And I said, you got to go? He said, yes, I got to get out of here. I said, well, David, out of here where? He said, I'm going to Africa. I said, well, David, you're going to Africa. He said, I got to get my head clear. I got these things. He said, I just have to have my own peace of mind. And I said, what about Elaine, David? He said, well, I'll deal with Elaine. I'll call Elaine later. He said, but right now I got to go. And I found out later the only person that David had told of going to Africa was me, his brother William, and I think there was a possibility that it was Neil Brennan. I said, David, you go and do what you have to do. And I said, but let me know when you get back in town. Some of you asked, why did he go to Africa? Because David was a practicing Muslim. And David went to Africa because he knew his fate was over there, his faith. And he knew that practicing Muslims was over there, and they would guide him or steer him in the right direction. His sister was and is today a practicing Muslim. Now, I want to remind you that when David went to Africa, where he was going, no one knew him, because David told me on the telephone, he said, now, cuz where I'm going, he said, where I'm going, no one knows me. He said, I hope they don't, cuz. I hope they don't. He said, but I'm going there because I realize and I understand that there are Muslims over there. He said, but I don't know them and they don't know me. And so I said, well, David, go on and do what you have to do. I said, just let me know when you get back. So that's what David did. He went on, and while David was away, I received phone calls. Now, I don't know whether David's brother William received any phone calls, because David's brother William, him and I, we were not as close. But I know I received phone calls asking, have you seen David? Do you know where David is? And I knew where David was, but I could not tell anyone, because I told David during our conversation that I would never tell anyone unless he told me to tell them. And I knew that after what David had told me about the meeting with the executives, that I felt really good that David got the hell away. When David got ready to come back, David called me and said, cuz, I'm back in town. Well, he let his wife know, and everything was fine there. When he called me, he told me, he said, I'm out of the entertainment world. I don't want to do comedy on television anymore. He said, I'm finished with all of that. I'm finished. I said, Dave, are you sure? He said, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with being on television, doing comedy. He said, what I want to go back to is doing comedy at the little local comedy places. And I said, well, David, are you sure that's what you are? He said, yeah, because he said, I have enough money to take care of my family and my farm and my mother and people in my family. He said, but I just don't want to do any comedy on television. He said, I'm done. Anyway, while talking to David, he gave me a sense of hope. That David was going to be all right, because he was finished with the, this Chappelle show, the comedy show on television, and then he wasn't going to do any more appearance on any other show. And so it gave me a sense of relief for him. Okay, but they found out somehow that David was back in town, and he was doing, comedy at these little local comedy clubs and things like that. First, David went to the inside the actor's studio. He was asked to come and be on the show with the host there. And, David was fine. He went on the show, and the questions was asked to him, why did he go to Africa and what went down? And I remember that David told exactly, the same thing that I'm telling you now, and that how, this whole thing was kind of shaking, and he didn't want no parts of him. Then he also went and he told about Martin Lawrence. Now, Martin Lawrence, they did the same thing to him too. But Martin Lawrence, and no one today, we have not seen Martin Lawrence. No one knows where Martin Lawrence is, because you know why? Martin Lawrence is dead. I mean, body, soul, spirit, dead. If you ever see a Martin Lawrence come back on the scene, it's because that Martin Lawrence, before they killed him, they made a clone of Martin Lawrence, and they had that clone in waiting. Waiting for what? I don't know. And but no one has seen Martin Lawrence. No one knows anything about Martin Lawrence anymore. But if you ever, and I say to you all who all are listening, if you see Martin Lawrence, then you know that he's a clone. And because they were supposed to, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith was supposed to be, they supposed to have done a film that was supposed to have came out last summer. But the film never did come out. Why? Because there was no Martin Lawrence. So, I'm just going to, so, anyway, just wanted to share that with you. But Dave Chappelle went on stage with, and was in the audience. It was a group of young people there who were interested in becoming comedians or becoming actors or what have you. And Dave went there to, to tell them about the business, about the Illuminati, because David felt that what they had said to him in the executive office, he wanted people to know what was going on, just as Martin Lawrence wanted people to know, just as Britney Spears wanted people to know, just as some of the stars here today want people to know about the Illuminati. So that's what David did. David wanted people to know what they were doing to him and what they were all about. So this is what he said on the stage. So he told them, to make sure that that was a sure thing for them to do, to go into, and he warned them, okay? And then the next person, and when I talked to David, I said, David, you should not go there, you should not go there, you should not go there. But David, he was so afraid that David wanted to expose the inner dark circle. He wanted to expose them. And so the next person who invited David on their show was Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey, and I told Dave, I said, Dave, please don't go there. He said, no, cuz I'm going to be all right. He said, but I just want to let people, I want to talk, cuz I want to talk. So I said, okay. So David went on that show. And now, and if you notice or not, when David was on that show, on Oprah Winfrey's show, Oprah was trying to coach him along and saying to him, but you did, you were stressful, weren't you? And David was saying, no, anybody was under stress of what they said to me in that office, but she wanted David to admit things that were not true with David, that was not going on with David at that time. And if you watch the taping show of Oprah and David, if you notice or not, David was looking around to make sure that no one else was coming in behind him. David was fearful of even being on the Oprah show. And then another thing, if you take notice or not, when Oprah was talking, David had his hand over his mouth, and like he was saying to himself, Oprah, I know what you're trying to do. I know what you're trying to do. And so, but David was fearful of being on the Oprah Winfrey show. And not only with the appearance that he was making, the gestures and sort of thing, and the looking around, but when David left the Oprah Winfrey show, I got a phone call. And who was the phone call? None other than David Chappelle. And he told me some things that he speculated of Oprah Winfrey. And I said, David, I told you not to go on that show. I told you not to go on that show. Because Oprah is already into that dark circle. Oprah was the one that ushered Obama into office. And that's one of the reasons why they wanted David to quit on the blacks, because Oprah ushered him in. Oprah was in favor of Obama getting into office. Oprah was behind Obama, on the side of Obama, and as might as well say, in front of Obama. She got him into office. And I said, David, I told you not to go on that show. He said, well, I'm done. I'm done. Now, David finally, once and for all, he got to know where Oprah Winfrey was coming from. David didn't trust Oprah Winfrey, and he was glad that the show was over with. And David told me that when he left Oprah Winfrey, he had to keep looking over his shoulder because he didn't trust Oprah. And well, nobody that, any of us, we know that Oprah is one of the queen bees, dark bees of the Illuminati. And so, I wouldn't trust her. And so, but David felt that it was over. David went home, and things began to happen to David. Leading up to the course of time for him to go back into the executive office. Now, I'm not going to pinpoint the exact time and the exact date, but David was receiving threatening letters. He received a package in the mail. It was Bill Cosby. It was who was another one? It was Bill Cosby. It was even Al. That's why I don't like Al Sharpton today. It was Bill Cosby, Al Sharpton. It was Whoopi Goldberg, and it was a few others that was into putting the pressure on David to stop this thing with the black race. Now that was before, and it was even afterwards. But they were putting the pressure on him, and so eventually down the line, David was doing his comedy in the local comedy clubs, but then he got a phone call again, and he said, called me and told me, he said, "Cuz, they called me again." I said, "Who called you again?" He said, "The executives." And he said, they want to talk to me one more time. They're thinking about the possibility of me doing the Chappelle show and doing it the way that I want to do it. I want to be, he said, because the only reason why I told them when I talked to them the last time that the only way I would do the Chappelle show again would be if I did it my way. And it would be set up on my terms. And so I received a phone call and they want to talk to me about it. Well, my antennas went up. I said, "David, now you be careful now," I said, because they could be saying that. He said, "No, I really think they're serious this time, cuz." He said, because made it definite with them that the only way that he said, I told it on Oprah Winfrey show too, that the only way that I would do the Chappelle show again, it would have to be on my terms, my way, and and the money that I make, even if it wasn't $50 million, it would have to go to the people, and but it had to be on my terms. So I said, "Okay, David." I said, "Well, do you trust him?" David said, "Yeah." David said, "Well, I think I can trust him this time." So I said, "Well, David, whatever the situation is, please give me a call." He said, "That's right, cuz." And so David left. We hung up. I should say we hung up. I have not heard from David, not even today. I have not heard from David. Now, what I think is this, that Neil Brennan is a question mark, 100%. A question mark. I believe that David went there, and they discussed once again about the $50 million, and I believe Neil Brennan was somewhere in that office, and then they told. I'm believing that they told David that they wanted him to see something, just like they did Bernie Mac. Oh yes, indeed, they took Bernie. Let me stop on David for a few minutes. But they showed Bernie Mac the cloning lab, and they showed Bernie Mac the cloning lab, and he went down and he saw how people were being cloned. And when Bernie Mac came back and told Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley and a few others, and that he saw the cloning lab, and that something had to be done to stop that foolishness of what they were doing. Well, Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley went back and told the top brass of the Illuminati, the dark circle, in a dark circle, and what they did, they killed him. Okay, so now let's go back to David Chappelle. I'm truly believing that they told David they had something they wanted him to see, and they took David to the underground cloning lab. And when they took David down there, I'm believing that before they took David down there, they promised David that they would go along with his deal, with David's deal, to get him to sign the contract. And I'm believing that David, thinking that he would get back on the Chappelle show, working with Comedy Central, that everything was going to be all right. And I'm believing that David signed that contract thinking that. And when he signed that contract, they wanted David to go and look at something else. It could have been maybe telling him that maybe it was a new studio or something of some kind or what have you. But they got David after signing the contract, and then once he signed the contract, they took him someplace else, and the place that they took him to was to the underground lab. And when they got him down there, they cloned David. And when they clone a person, and I want you to do your research, cloning today only takes a couple, maybe to several hours to be cloned. Well, this is what I strongly believe they did to David. They took him to this underground lab. And what they did is they smiling in his face and just going along with David so that David would not yield up or fight or this sort of thing. And they cloned him. And once they cloned David Chappelle, then they killed David Chappelle. Okay, and once they killed David Chappelle, that was it. And once they did this, then they had full control of this new Dave Chappelle. They had to clone him, and then once they cloned him, this is what I'm thinking too, that when they cloned him, then they got the clone to sign David's name for not only 50 million, but the 60 million as well. Well, let me say this. I had not heard from David when he was supposed to have met with the executives the second time, and Dave promised me and assured me he would call me to let me know the outcome. I have not heard from David since. When I turned my television on and I saw this man there on some kind of show, and he had one pants leg rolled all the way down and the other one rolled all the way up, and they said this was Dave Chappelle. I said, Dave, who? And I went to the television and I looked and I said, hell no, that ain't no David Chappelle or no Dave Chappelle. No, hell no. And so I got on the cell phone and I called my cousin David. And I called, the phone rang and it rang and it rang. I think it was maybe on the fourth or fifth ring that someone picked up the telephone and said, hello. I said, yeah, let me speak to David. And the person on the other end said, who are you? I said, I'm David Chappelle's cousin. And the phone clicked. It clicked. It went dead. So I called the number right back up again, and the phone rang, and it rang, and it rang. I never got in contact with David. Now, I called David's brother, William. Didn't get an answer from him either. I don't know what had happened, but I didn't get an answer from him. But when I saw this man on television with one pants leg all the way down and the other pants leg rolled up, I knew damn well that was not my cousin, not my Uncle William's son. Hell no. And when this new Dave had his pants leg rolled up, that was a symbol of the Masons. Now, David Chappelle was a practicing Muslim. My cousin Felicia, she's a practicing Muslim all the way. You see, David has children that has Muslim names. Now, why would all of a sudden this David turn from Muslim to Mason? It didn't add up. Okay, and then when they began to show this new Dave pictures of him, and I knew doggone well that wasn't David Chappelle. And then look at the comparison. Now, the old David, his eyes, David had semi-big eyes, but his eyes were more slanted than bulged out eyes. And David and I, we always talked about his weight. And I was, Dave, you need to get, they said, no, because I don't want to be big. I want to stay small. I said, well, why? Because I can run fast. I can do things fast. David never believed in being a big, husky type person. This new person here today, they have him as a big, husky type person, like a bodybuilder. His eyes are budging out of his head. His neck is as big as one of the wrestlers' necks on the WrestleMania. You see, that's not, I'm telling you, you all can believe what you want to believe, but I know what I know. The family, the Chappelle family knows this. This is not our family member. This is not my cousin, but this new Dave that they have out, it looks nothing like the old David Chappelle. The old David, he would have like a mustache. The new Dave, they have a mustache, but like mustache, but it looks like it's painted on his face. It's not the mustache that the old David Chappelle, had. Now, when they did David, made him a clone. Now, this is the thing now. They knew that his wife and his children and his mother would know the difference. If once they cloned David Chappelle and sent this new Dave back home, they would know the difference. This is not my husband. This is not my father, and this is not my son. So what they had to do, then they made threats to David earlier about taking out his wife, his children, and his mother. They told David at one time, this was all after they asked David to quit smashing on the black race as far as the character that he was playing on the Chappelle show. And they told David, too, that if he didn't stop, they would take out his mother, they would take out his wife, they would take out his children. And so now they knew that once they cloned this Dave or David, whatever you want to call him, but I know him as David, that once he goes back to Ohio, the family would know that this is not the man. It's a man of Russia, Putin, because Putin is cloned too, whether you believe it or not, but you do your research and find out these things now here. And when Putin was cloned, his wife said, when they send him back home, she said, she got on in front of the cameras, she told everybody, this man is not my husband. She said, no, this is not my husband. This is a different man. And she saw the difference that this man had brought forth. Well, she was beginning to run her mouth a little bit too much. So what did they do? They didn't do it until Putin's wife was going to divorce Putin. And so what did they do? They cloned her. They cloned her. And now, if you ask her if Putin is her husband, she'll tell you, yes, that's my husband. And if you do your research on it, you'll find statements and bulletins and that where she said at one time, that's not my husband. I don't know who this man is. This is an imposter that I'm living with. And, do your research and find out what she said. And so they figured if they sent David back home to his wife, his children, and his mother, they would say the same thing. So they had to do something. And so what they did before they sent David back home to his family, they cloned his wife, Elaine, they cloned his children, and they cloned his mama, my aunt. And they cloned all of them. And so now they were able to send David back home to them. And they don't know the difference. And you know why they don't know the difference? Because they all have been cloned. They all have been cloned. And if you go to them and ask them of the things, that I said about David, they'll look at you and say, no, something is wrong with her. She's, and they'll say this. Well, naturally, they'll say this. That's why they cloned David's wife, mother, and children, because they knew that David loved his family. And it wouldn't look right for David and all of his family to just all of a sudden, but especially his family to die or something of that nature. So they had to clone them as well. And they're living happily ever after as clones on the farm in Ohio, in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And so, and what they're doing off of this clone David, they're going to use this clone David to make money off of. Oh, they're going to push this clone David. They're going to push him and push him. They're going to make so much money off of him until they can't make enough. And once they have made enough, then they're going to kill off the clone. But you see that if you listeners out there compare the original David to this new David, the original David Chappelle made people, this man, the original was funny. I mean, he was fun. He told you, he would tell jokes to me and I would just laugh like that. But now this new clone, he's not as funny as the old David is. There are things that the old David did, this new David doesn't even do. He doesn't, and if you listen, but you have to listen closely to this clone's voice. I'm telling you, listen very closely. This new clone does not, because I've picked it up and several other Chappelle family members have picked it up. This new clone does not have the original tone voice that David Chappelle had.